welcome to the Unmuted podcast. My name is Jeff. I'm your host, and we talk about all things HR, HR tech, talent, and then everything in between. I'm also the founder of Scale HR and your podcast host. So we've been recording more episodes lately, and so these episodes can be seen on our YouTube channel or on our website at goscalehr.com. And so we've seen an uptick in subscribers and likes, and most importantly, comment to all of our videos and podcast episodes, which is great. And so before I bring in our guest, I just want to talk about a couple things. So this episode, the topic is Generation Next, managing the evolving workplace. So we're going to dive into, generational work groups. And obviously that's, always a huge topic. And it's been a huge topic for, many years now, I think. And so today, we have a lot of, different generations in our work places. And just in the last couple of years, millennials have started to, outnumber boomer, and then probably getting close to Gen X as well. And so that's even more prevalent in the leadership ranks too. So the workplace dynamics are changing, but we still have a lot of, traditionalists, the ones that are born in the 40s, some of them are still working, and, boomers are still working. And so I don't see some mass exodus of retirement. But you know what? My guest is going to break it all down for us. And I just want to just point out, and I say this often, the world of work has changed in the last, 3 to 4 years. We have technology is blowing up, flexible work structures, global workforces, increasing financial pressure, and the changing dynamic, between the employee and manager and organizations. And so I think you could argue that a lot of these changes are partly a result of the changing workforce demographics. And so different groups want different things. And so that is, setting the context. But it's time now to, welcome our guests, Sally, Rosa, who's been a long-time contact of mine. And I just want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sounds good. Before we dive into our topic, I just want to ask you if you can tell us a bit about what you do.
Perfect. Yeah. So my name is Sally. I personally have been in the workforce for about 20 years, mostly in human resources. So I'm a human resource professional by trade, but in the last 6 to 7 years have entered the entrepreneurship world. I run an organization called HRY, so still very much in the HR industry, but more focused on a technology. We're based out of Montreal. Lots of our customers are Canadian with employees internationally. So it's been fun because I kind of got to take my practice of HR from just that one organization to getting to see what multiple and international organizations do. So that's my trajectory a little.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you. I mean, so we've been connected for some time, and obviously I always say to people that, well, did we meet pre-pandemic or post? Because they're two different worlds.
What? It was pre-pandemic because you had a Montreal-based event where people were still allowed to see each other at the time. So it was pre-pandemic, and then we shut down for a few years, and now you're coming back to in-person events. I'll have to be attending and presenting at those, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll actually be back in Montreal this fall. Haven't made any announcements yet in terms of venue and date, but yeah. So let's dive into our topic here. So obviously there are different generations, working in the workplace. So how do you define the different generations, and then what are some of the common stereotypes and misconceptions, that are attached to each?
So for the first time, I believe there are actively 5 generations in the workforce. Like you said before, from traditionalists that are born up to the 40s, baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and the latest Generation Z. And honestly, there's a lot of reasons for that. One, we are living longer and healthier, but also because of multiple financial crises, can't really retire at the same time as we used to. So for the first time, there is a really diverse workforce. And I'm going to maybe tap into the word diverse because it really does end up playing into diversity. And so if you have a diversity and inclusion program in your workplace, it's really important to consider age as one of those things as well, because it ends up affecting culture and the way that you run a business. For sure, stereotypes like the traditionalists are, maybe I'll even use the typical stereotypes. So traditionalists, baby boomers work hard. Then you get into Gen X, work hard, play hard. Millennials work hard, play harder. And then maybe Gen Z focus more on the play, less on the work, and that's okay. Again, not here to judge by any means, but obviously the world's adventures throughout the years are what have caused that shift, and the person's focus on their own priorities has shifted from living to work to working to live. So that's a little bit about the generations that are in the workforce right now.
So that's actually like, I mean, that can be really complicated. I mean, obviously, I've been in HR for almost 25 years now, and I've led HR, I've managed people and all this kind of stuff. And so it can be really complicated. And I'd never like to, compartmentalize people based on their age. It's just not, because everyone's different. But, obviously, if you can even just start to get to know some of these groups in terms of their natural tendencies, and that'll, set you on the right path. But what are some of the challenges you have observed when managing multiple generations?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because there's going to be challenges regardless. But I think the first, maybe invisible, let's call it, challenge is that you're going to have people who say, oh yeah, Sally's a great manager or whatever. But what does that even mean? Because now that I've had my own children, I know that I parent them very differently from one another. Like, they are two different people who need to be parented completely differently. And I would say it's really similar when it comes to generations. Like, you might be a great manager, but to be a great manager while managing different workforces, you actually do have to manage them very differently because of the way that they have grown up in the workforce. And so someone, if we're talking about the flexible workplaces, so a couple of years ago, after we were over the pandemic, you heard the big executives of Meta and of X saying, we're going back to, or Salesforce even, we are going back to the office. And that caused so much controversy because the main focus was looking at the science of the performance. And so maybe you were performing more when you were in the workplace at a certain time, but perhaps not anymore, because you're not offering a flexibility that feeds this generation of diversity as well. Because we do know that if you have proper diversity programs, your performance could boost up to 30%. And so if you're including age in that, that's where you start seeing that I have to manage them differently. So we're not saying everybody go back to the office. We're not saying everybody stay home. But if you're capable of offering that flexible hybrid environment where you can, that's one of the ways that you can cater to having different generations. And obviously other things, right? We're talking about communication styles. Of course, Gen Z was born almost with a phone in their hands, or if they're not, their parents are always on the phone. I know I'm totally someone who does this all the time, right? I mean, we don't want to be, but we're checking emails when we shouldn't be. And so they see that. And so that's common to them. It's not taboo. Whereas a baby boomer, a traditionalist that was kind of brought on the cell phone later in life, it does not become second nature. So you've got the more face-to-face value that comes with that, where you have more the efficiency, the quick, the speedy that comes with a later generation. Both fantastic. In fact, you need both in order to succeed within your organization. There's value in all of the generations, but it's being able to offer communication platforms or styles that cater to both. It's being able to be a manager who can empathize with the person I'm managing in order to cater to their specific needs. I think those are the things that are going to make you successful in managing 5 generations within your organization.
It's what you're saying is managers have a more, difficult job today than they used to, probably. And I think so one thing that I've always said to people is that we're in an era of, hyper personalization and flexibility. And I always compare it to, same thing with marketing products and services. I mean, like when you look at, buying a car. I mean, you can hyper personalize, your actual experience, whether it's in a dealership, online, on your phone. I think they've done a really good job at, hyper personalizing. It's exactly the same concept, but you're dealing with a very different product or, context. So you talked a little bit about, obviously some of the differences. And what I wanted to ask you is about how you can effectively bridge generation gap and foster collaboration and then understanding among different team members, because obviously they communicate differently, and we're gonna get into technology in a little bit, but it is something that you've done that helps sort of break the ice or foster collaboration and an understanding among the different groups.
Yeah, I think a lot of the, let's call it conflict, if there is any, or misunderstanding, is because of being within our own bubble often. And I mean, with reason, you're living your own world. And especially if you're in an organization where the age spectrum is not wide, then you're not forced to see outside of that specific bubble. So I think that when you are working in an organization that has those 5 generations, it's going to be about education. So educating the older generation on why it is that younger generations want more immediate feedback, more immediate responses, more immediate this and that. It's not because they're in such a rush and their phones have taught them this and that. It's actually because their generation values efficiency. Educating them that actually the younger generation that wants to clock out at 5 o'clock, it's not because they're not hard workers. It's because they value their mental health. And actually mental health being a great topic, educating everyone across all generations on mental health, because our Gen Zs and our millennials understand the value of keeping your mental health up there. It's never too late to educate the silent generation and baby boomers who actually have so much trauma potentially about, opening up in those factors and being vulnerable, etc. So I think in the end, the answer to that question actually has to do with empathy, because the more we can educate each other's generations on why the next does things a certain way, the more we can become empathetic to those behaviors and work in collaboration with those behaviors. I think that would be my reply to that.
No, I really like that, because a lot of people think that there might be a silver bullet technology or strategy. Well, that's not always the case. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as just having conversations that are focused on teaching or educating and opening up minds, which is probably the biggest thing.
It's changing taboos too, right? Like just to piggyback on what you said, it's not okay, but how many times have you heard someone say like, oh, the new generation is so spoiled, the new generation needs to have things right away, everything's handed to them, etc. That's what we need to break, because we're saying that about Gen Z, but Gen X said it about Gen Y and baby boomers said it about so it's like, if we can start exactly educating, empathizing, and explaining those behaviors and the fact that they come with proper reasoning and not being spoiled, that's where you really bridge the gap, I think.
I totally agree. And also actually getting to, to know your people. I mean, you could have Gen Z employees that don't behave and act like
Absolutely.
stereotypical Gen Zs, right? And then vice versa. So I think, that's actually really important. And so I always try to throw questions in about technology, because that's sort of my interest and background. So how does technology play a role in bridging the generational divide
It is
in the
such a
workplace?
trick question, because obviously I'm in the tech world. I sell and implement HRIS. And so for me, my gut is to say, like, it's so important. You absolutely have to get everybody involved in technology, etc. So on the one hand, I do think that technology can support all of these efforts, because technology offers a communication path. Technology offers, so many things that can enable us to bridge that gap a little bit better. That said, when we're implementing technology, there's a couple of things you got to keep in mind. And I do have customers whose employees are of an older generation who doesn't always have their phones. So there's 2 things. One, communicate in a way that your younger generations will receive the information, but also find a way to share that information with the older generation. Secondly, lower your expectations a little bit when it comes to the older generation. The goal is not to get the older generation to be as efficient with technology as the younger generation is. It's to accept it and then find a way to use it to their advantage. But if the older generation is not down with having all of their calls on Teams and Zoom, that's where the flexibility comes in. And we have to have an acceptance level of that hybrid world of I'm going to have certain meetings, performance meetings in person, whatever it is that can bring them into the collaborative world that you live. So technology is super crucial, but also it's not the end all be all, because it's not fair to expect an older generation to manage it the way that a newer generation manages it.
So would your answer differ if obviously, we've seen more companies go virtual and have some kind of a hybrid structure, and so when you're working from home, you don't have that benefit of just sort of getting up from your office or your desk and walking down the hallway, and so technology become a really big part of what you do. Did that change your answer at all for organizations that
It really
are
doesn't,
mostly
because
virtual?
when I said that both sides have to empathize, all that means is the guy doesn't want to get on Teams. Pick up your phone when he calls, because we're of a generation, or the younger generations will look at their phones and ignore the call. That's what we do. We ignore calls. We hate picking up the phone. Let's face it. So I think that's what I mean by the collaborative approach is once we educate the different generations of the expectations of other generations, then you're in a generation that needs to empathize and collaborate with the next. And so your job is going to be to pick up the phone that does not have a FaceTime, that does not have a Teams, and just, answer the question. If you can't answer the question, that's fine. Hey, Bob, I'm going to get right back to you. But that's the extra effort that the younger generations have to make to meet them happy.
That's a fantastic answer. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so if there's one thing that our viewers, listeners can learn about this episode, what would that be?
I mean, it's so cliche, but I'm going to say empathy in the end. It's empathize. It's understand that no way is the right way, that everybody does certain things for a reason, because of where they were brought up, because of how they were brought up, because of the mentors and coaches that they had. So certainly I would say empathy. But the other thing I would say is there is no one generation in the workforce that is stronger than the next. So ensure that as a manager, you're tapping into the strengths of each and every one of them. So mentoring from an older generation, technology coaching from a younger generation, efficiency from a younger generation, strategy midway. So, empathy is the answer, but in the on the flip side, I would also say collaboration to ensure that you're tapping into all the strengths of it.
I totally love it. Thank you very much for being here, and Sally. And it's a fantastic topic. I mean, we can probably go on for hours, but so I just want to thank you for being here. We'll share all of your contact links in our episode right up. So once again, the Unmuted Podcast, all things HR tech, and talent. We drop new episodes every week on Thursday morning normally, and you can watch the videos on our website at GoScaleHR.com or on our YouTube channel as well. So don't love to hear your comments. So just please drop your comments in the comment section, and hit the like button and do all those great things. So Sally, thank you for being here, and we'll talk soon.